At the heart of a glittering class reunion, Hannah Tran was a ghost, her name just a faint echo in a room celebrating her younger sister's rise. To them she was nothing, a shadow in a blue dress, a life dismissed as a failure. But the night held a secret: the thunder of helicopters, the solemn salute of a colonel, and a title that would shatter their illusions. As the stars above bore witness, Hannah's truth was about to strike like lightning, illuminating a legacy no one could deny. Are you ready for the storm? Subscribe now so you won't miss more emotional, powerful stories with unexpected twists. Comment below where you're watching from, and stay tuned to hear the rest of Hannah's incredible story. In the dim glow of a chandelier where light fractures into 1,000 fleeting prisms, the heart can feel both invisible and exposed, a paradox that defines the sting of being unseen by those who should know you best. Hannah Tran, at 42, stepped into the grand ballroom of the Aspen Grove Resort, her navy dress a quiet choice against the opulence of crystal and ivory. The 20-year high school reunion buzzed with curated nostalgia, a stage where every smile was rehearsed, every name tag a verdict. Hers read simply, Hannah Tran. No title, no flourish, just a name in stark font, as if her existence required no further explanation. Within moments, the glances, half curious, half dismissive, reminded her of the narrative her classmates had long ago written: Hannah, the one who could have been something but wasn't. Psychologically, the reunion is a crucible, a space where past promises collide with present realities, exposing the fragile threads of identity woven in youth. Hannah's presence was not celebrated, but tolerated. Her name, placed at table 14, near the clatter of buffet trays, far from the gold-embossed seats of the accomplished. Her younger sister Lynn, at 39, stood at the podium, her emerald dress catching the light as she spoke with the effortless poise of someone who had always known how to command a room. After a decade leading cybersecurity at the Department of Homeland Security, Lynn declared, "I'm honored to serve as Deputy Director for Pacific Operations. But it all began here at Jefferson High with the support of my sister Hannah, who's always been herself." The crowd's chuckle was a blade, sharp and subtle, slicing through the air with the weight of Lynn's veiled condescension. Hannah's face remained still, her West Point ring hidden beneath her sleeve, a silent testament to a life her sister had chosen to diminish. "You've felt this, haven't you? The ache of standing in a room where your story is rewritten by those who should know it best." The reunion was not a homecoming for Hannah, but a mirror reflecting a family and a past that had cast her as the shadow to Lynn's light. Lynn's words, draped in the guise of affection, were a performance, a way to claim the spotlight while relegating Hannah to the wings. This is the archetype of the overlooked sibling, whose quiet strength is mistaken for absence, whose victories are buried under the weight of another's narrative. The psychology of such moments is rooted in comparison, a dynamic where one's worth is measured not by their own merits, but by their proximity to another's glory. Lynn's success was real, but it was amplified by Hannah's perceived failure, a contrast that made Lynn's star shine brighter. At table 14, the whispers were as loud as the clinking glasses. Ethan Nguyen, a former classmate now cloaked in the arrogance of a tech mogul, leaned across the table with a smirk. "Hannah still out there in some dusty outpost? Or are you shuffling papers in Nevada now?" His tone was light, but his eyes were heavy with judgment, as if her life were a punchline he'd rehearsed. A woman in a sequined dress nearby murmured to her companion, "Didn't she drop out of law school?" Such a waste. The words stung not because they were true, but because they echoed the narrative Lynn had crafted over years. A narrative where Hannah was the cautionary tale, the one who chose wrongly. Yet Hannah's smile was tight, practiced as shield, forged in war rooms and classified briefings where she had learned to absorb blows without flinching. The ballroom's air grew heavier, as if the weight of unspoken truths pressed against the crystal chandeliers. Hannah's silence was not weakness, but strategy. A choice honed over 2 decades of navigating spaces where her presence was questioned. Psychologically, silence in the face of dismissal is a form of power, a refusal to engage in a game rigged against you. Hannah's West Point ring, hidden but ever present, was a reminder of her truth. She was not the failure they imagined, but a lieutenant general whose service was cloaked in secrecy. The navy dress, chosen for its simplicity, had once been worn beneath a military coat during a NATO briefing, a detail none of them could fathom. You know this choice, don't you? The decision to hold your truth close, not out of shame, but because some victories are too sacred to be paraded before those who wouldn't understand. As Lynn's speech ended, the applause swelled a tide of approval that excluded Hannah. Ethan returned flanked by two classmates, their laughter a chorus of condescension. Army Right One asked, squinting as if trying to place her, like a desk job or something. The assumption was not innocent. It was a deliberate diminishment, a way to keep Hannah small. She took a sip of water, her hand steady despite the tremor in her chest, and replied, something like that. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held a fire that only those who knew sacrifice could recognize. She rose, slipping out to the balcony, where the night air offered a reprieve from the ballroom's suffocating script. Her encrypted phone buzzed a secure message from Cyber Command, a reminder of the world where she was not invisible, but indispensable. The wind curled around the balcony, carrying the faint hum of the reunion's laughter. Hannah stood alone, her gaze fixed on the dark treetops, the resort's golden lights bleeding into the grass below. This was her element, the quiet, the unseen, where purpose outweighed applause. Psychologically, such moments of solitude are not retreat, but reclamation, a space where the self can breathe free from others' expectations. Hannah's story is the archetype of the unsung hero, whose strength lies not in recognition, but in resilience, in the ability to carry on when the world refuses to see you. As she stood there, the stars above whispered of missions, uncelebrated, of lives saved in silence, of a legacy etched not in gold, but in grit. The reunion, with its polished facades and practiced smiles, was a stage she no longer needed to perform on. But the night was not over, and the truth, like the stars, would not stay hidden forever. The balcony's edge held Hannah Tran, steady the cool night air, a counterpoint to the ballroom's stifling glow, where laughter and clinking glasses wove a tapestry of curated triumph. The stars above Aspen Grove Resort glimmered like fragments of a truth, too vast for the polished crowd within their light, a silent testament to lives lived beyond the spotlight. Hannah's navy dress fluttered faintly in the breeze. Her West Point ring still concealed a private anchor to a life her classmates could not comprehend. The reunion was a theater of comparison, where her sister Lynn's ascent was celebrated as the pinnacle, while Hannah's existence was reduced to a footnote, a shadow cast by Lynn's deliberate radiance. Yet in this moment, alone with the night, Hannah was not diminished, but fortified her silence, a fortress built from years of unseen battles. Psychologically, the act of standing apart is a rebellion against the human need for belonging, a need that can bind us to spaces that harm us most. Lynn's speech, with its veiled barbs about Hannah's unique path, was not just a slight, but a calculated erasure, a way to reinforce the narrative that Hannah had chosen obscurity over ambition. This is the archetype of the scapegoat sibling whose sacrifices are overshadowed by another's need to shine. Lynn's charisma, her deputy director title, her emerald dress. They were props in a performance that required Hannah's absence to complete the script. The crowd's laughter, Ethan's smug jabs, the whispered pity from a woman in sequins. These were not accidents, but choreography designed to keep Hannah on the margins. Yet margins, when chosen, become sanctuaries, places where the soul can redefine itself without the weight of others' expectations. Have you stood on such a margin, felt the pull to shrink into the role others cast for you, yet chosen to hold your ground? Instead, Hannah's stillness was not surrender, but strength. A lesson learned in the crucible of classified operations where visibility was a liability and silence a shield. Her encrypted phone buzzed again, its glow cutting through the dark, a message from Colonel David Pham, urgent and clipped. Merlin breach escalating. Need your eyes on intercepts DC by 0600. The words were a tether pulling her back to a world where her presence was not just acknowledged, but critical. She slipped the phone into her clutch, her gaze lingering on the treetops, where the wind whispered of choices made in the dark of victories won without fanfare. Inside the reunion's rhythm surged Lynn's voice, now mingling with the MCs announcing the Most Distinguished Alumni Award. The applause was a tidal wave washing over Hannah's absence as she re-entered the ballroom. Lynn stood radiant, accepting the accolade with a smile that seemed to hold the room captive. Leadership, she said, is about showing up, not hiding in the shadows. The words were a dart aimed at Hannah, who stood near the back, her presence unnoticed by most. Ethan, emboldened by wine, raised a glass to Lynn, proof that real stars don't fade. The crowd laughed, a sound that grated against Hannah's calm, but she did not flinch. Her training had taught her to absorb such blows, to let them pass through without breaking her resolve. The archetype of the unsung hero thrives in such moments where dismissal becomes fuel for clarity. Psychologically, the pain of being overlooked triggers a primal wound, yet it also sparks resilience, a refusal to let others' perceptions define your truth. Hannah's truth was not in the ballroom's applause, but in the missions she had led, the lives she had protected, the silences she had carried like medals no one could pin. As Lynn stepped down, Ethan approached again, his smirk softer now, tinged with curiosity. "Hannah, seriously, what do you do out there?" "Still in the army, right? Filing reports somewhere." She met his gaze, her voice. "Even I serve where I'm needed." The vagueness was deliberate, a boundary drawn in the sand protecting a life too vast for his comprehension. The night shifted when the sky began to rumble, a low vibration that stirred the air like a pulse. Guests paused, glasses hovering mid-sip, as the sound grew a mechanical roar slicing through the resort's golden haze. Outside, the lawn lights flickered, replaced by the harsh beams of a descending helicopter, its matte black form cutting the night with surgical precision. The crowd spilled onto the grass, confusion rippling through their ranks as rotors kicked up a storm of petals and leaves. Colonel Pham emerged, his dress uniform gleaming under the floodlights, his stride unwavering as he crossed the lawn. His eyes locked on Hannah, who stood apart, her navy dress catching the wind like a flag of defiance. He stopped, saluted sharply, and spoke with a voice that carried over the chaos. "Lieutenant General Tran, ma'am, the Pentagon requires your immediate presence. Merlin briefing critical." The words detonated in the silence, shattering the reunion script. Lynn's champagne flute slipped, staining her dress, her face a mask of disbelief. Ethan's glass hung limp, his smirk erased. A reporter's camera flashed, capturing the moment as whispers turned to gasps. "General, her psychologically, such a revelation disrupts the collective narrative, forcing a reckoning with assumptions long held as truth." Hannah's title, unspoken for years, was not just a rank, but a reclamation, a truth that reframed her as the hero, not the failure. "You've felt this shift, haven't you? The moment when the world's perception of you cracks, revealing the strength you've carried all along." Hannah's nod to Pham was not triumphant, but resolute, a silent acknowledgement of a duty that outweighed the room's stunned stares. As she moved toward the helicopter, Melissa, her old classmate, stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. "Hannah, you never said—" Hannah's faint smile was enough, "I didn't need to." Lynn, still rooted to the spot, clutched her clutch, her poise unraveling as the crowd's attention shifted. The helicopter's roar drowned out the reunion's noise, and as Hannah climbed aboard, the flashbulbs captured not a nobody, but a force undeniable and unyielding. The archetype of the silent warrior had spoken not with words, but with presence, rewriting the narrative in a single, thunderous moment. The night swallowed the ballroom's lights, but Hannah's truth burned brighter, a star no longer hidden, but blazing for all to see. The helicopter's ascent carved a wound in the night, its rotors slicing through the gilded haze of Aspen Grove Resort as Hannah Tran rose above the stunned crowd. The lawn below, strewn with scattered napkins and abandoned glasses, was a tableau of disrupted narratives where Lynn's polished triumph had crumbled under the weight of a truth too long suppressed. The matte black aircraft tilted toward the horizon, carrying Hannah not just from the reunion, but from a past that had tried to erase her. Her navy dress, unassuming yet resolute, caught the final glint of the resort's lights, a silent declaration that she had never been the shadow they cast her as. Inside the cabin, Colonel David Pham handed her a secure tablet, its screen already pulsing with data. Merlin breach logs, encrypted intercepts, a map dotted with red zones. The world of secrets awaited, but for a moment, Hannah's gaze lingered on the fading lights below, where her sister's silhouette stood frozen, a figure diminished not by Hannah's rise, but by her own refusal to see. Psychologically, the moment of revelation is a seismic shift, a rupture in the collective psyche that forces others to confront their misjudgments. Lynn's carefully crafted narrative, Hannah as the failed prodigy, the one who chose obscurity, had been a scaffold for her own success, a way to elevate herself by diminishing her sister. This is the archetype of the rival sibling whose need for supremacy distorts their perception, turning love into competition. Lynn's speech, her award, her calculated barbs. They were not just slights, but a campaign to rewrite Hannah's story, to bury her achievements under a veneer of pity and dismissal. Yet truth, when it emerges, is a relentless force, dismantling illusions with the precision of a blade. The helicopter, the salute, the title. Lieutenant General Tran, these were not props, but proofs, evidence of a life lived in service to a purpose greater than applause. You've known this moment, haven't you? When the world's assumptions about you shatter and you stand not to gloat, but to let your truth breathe. The Pentagon's secure suite was a stark contrast to the ballroom's opulence, its concrete walls and muted screens, a sanctuary of focus. Hannah shed the reunion's perfume, stepping into a world where her presence was not questioned, but demanded. The Merlin breach was no longer a whisper, but a scream, its data trails pointing to a compromise that threatened civilian grids. General Nguyen, a towering figure with a voice like gravel, greeted her with a nod. Tran, the chatter's gone public. Your sister's podcast, The Silent General, dropped 6 hours ago. It's a liability. The words stung not because they were unexpected, but because they confirmed Lynn's intent to spin Hannah's service into a narrative of self-aggrandizement, a military stunt for attention. Psychologically, this is the betrayer's final gambit to reclaim control by reshaping the truth they can no longer suppress. Lynn's podcast with its polished venom was not an apology, but an attack accusing Hannah of using her rank to steal the spotlight, as if silence had ever been a choice for fame. You've felt this sting, haven't you? The way those closest to you can twist your strength into a flaw, painting your resilience as arrogance to protect their own fragile egos. Hannah's response was not to engage, but to focus her eyes scanning the tablet's data. Disinformation vectors, hashtags linking her name to Merlin's leaks. The civilian world, with its viral clips and trending debates, had become a battlefield, one where her silence was both weapon and shield. Nguyen's gaze softened, a rare crack in his stoic facade. You're the fulcrum, Tran. Don't let them redefine you. His words echoed the lesson at the heart of Hannah's journey. Identity is not bestowed by others' acknowledgement, but forged in the choices you make when no one is watching. Back at her desk, the secure inbox overflowed media requests, accusations of fraud, a TikTok edit labeling her a deep state diva. Yet among the noise was a voice note from Min, her old classmate, now a journalist with a knack for uncovering truths. Hannah, Lynn's been digging. She deleted an email chain from 2018, one that blocked your Medal of Honor nomination. I've got a copy. It's bad. The revelation was a cold weight, not because it surprised her, but because it mapped the depth of Lynn's betrayal. The email sent from Lynn's DOJ account had cited Hannah's request for anonymity, a lie that ensured her valor went unrecognized. Psychologically, such sabotage is not just personal, but existential, an attempt to erase not just a person's achievements, but their very essence. Lynn had not just overshadowed Hannah, she had tried to erase her from history. The archetype of the betrayed hero is defined by this tension, the struggle to hold on to one's truth in the face of deliberate distortion. Hannah's response was not to lash out, but to prepare her fingers, tracing the edge of a folder containing her nomination records now recovered by Min. The truth was, her armor, not her weapon, a shield, built from years of silent service. As she walked the Pentagon's halls, the weight of her stars, literal and metaphorical, grounded her. You know this grounding, don't you? The moment when you choose to stand in your truth, not to prove others wrong, but to affirm your own worth. Hannah's journey was not about reclaiming the spotlight, but about refusing to let it define her. The helicopter's thunder had been a moment, but this quiet resolve was her legacy. In a small DC cafe days later, Hannah met Lynn. The air was heavy with the scent of espresso and rain, the windows fogged with the city's breath. Lynn sat across from her, no makeup, her hair in a loose braid, her eyes carrying the weight of a reckoning. She slid a velvet box across the table, inside a faded photo of two girls in Halloween costumes saluting with mismatched grins. I kept this, Lynn said, her voice raw. I didn't know why, until now. The confession that followed was not an apology, but an unraveling Lynn admitting she had spent years trying to outshine a sister she both envied and admired. Psychologically, this is the betrayer's paradox. Their actions stem not from hatred, but from a desperate need to define themselves against the other. Lynn's sabotage was not about Hannah's failure, but her own fear of being less. Hannah's hand rested on Lynn's, a gesture not of forgiveness, but of release. "We don't have to run anymore," she said, her voice a quiet anchor. The cafe's hum faded, and for a moment they were just sisters, not rivals bound by a past they could neither erase nor rewrite. This was not reconciliation, but recognition. A step toward a truth that needed no applause, only presence. The Fort Liberty classroom hummed with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, its beige walls absorbing the weight of Hannah Tran's words as she stood before her cadets. Their notebooks opened, their eyes sharp with the hunger to understand. The red light on her encrypted tablet blinked insistently. Ghost Viper's call pulling her toward a world of shadows and secrets. But for now, she was here in this scuffed floor sanctuary, teaching not just tactics, but truth. The poster from her cadets, our general, leaned against the podium, its hand-drawn courage a quiet echo of the Medal of Honor now tucked away in her quarters. Hannah's journey had brought her to this moment, not as a triumph over Lynn's betrayal, but as a reclamation of a selfhood forged in silence, a testament to the archetype of the unsung hero, who thrives not in applause, but in purpose. Psychologically, the act of teaching is a form of alchemy, transforming personal pain into collective wisdom. Hannah's cadets with their earnest questions. How do you lead when your own turn against you were not just students, but mirrors reflecting the resilience she had honed through years of being erased? Lynn's sabotage, from the blocked nomination to the podcast that painted Hannah as a spotlight-seeking fraud, was a wound that cut deep, not because it diminished her rank, but because it questioned her essence. The sibling betrayer, an archetype as old as stories themselves, thrives on comparison, using the other's light to fuel their own. Lynn's actions, erasing Hannah's name from alumni honors, whispering doubts about her stability, were not just jealousy, but a desperate bid to control the narrative to make her own success the only one that mattered. Yet Hannah's response in the cafe and beyond was not to mirror Lynn's tactics, but to transcend them, to let her service speak where words could be twisted. You've known this transcendence, haven't you? The choice to rise above the noise, to let your truth stand quiet but unyielding against those who try to rewrite it. Hannah's presence in the classroom was not about proving Lynn wrong, but about affirming her own right to exist, to lead, to teach. The cadets' questions, their scribbled notes, their straightened spines, they were proof that her silence had not been invisible, but resonant, a ripple that reached those who needed it most. Min's book, Leading in Silence, now in final edits, was another ripple, a way to share that resonance with a world beyond the classroom. Lynn's docuseries, tentative and unpolished, was a step toward reconciliation, not because it erased the past, but because it acknowledged a truth Lynn had once denied. Hannah's strength was not a threat, but a legacy. The Pentagon's call came at dawn, the South Lawn ceremony, a memory now etched in gold and blue. The Medal of Honor, pinned by the president's steady hands, was not a trophy, but a marker, a recognition of sacrifices made in shadows no one could name. The crowd's applause had been earnest, the cadets' salute a vow, but it was the quiet afterward, walking the side path behind the White House boots, silent on gravel, that held Hannah's peace. Psychologically, such moments are the heart of healing, not the public validation, but the private certainty that your worth was never theirs to define. The offer of a West Wing desk was tempting, a chance to shape policy in the open, but Hannah chose the classroom where her voice could shape lives instead. This is the archetype of the mentor who turns betrayal's wounds into lessons, guiding others through the battles she has fought. Have you found this piece? The stillness that comes when you stop seeking their approval and start building your own. Hannah's office at Fort Liberty was sparse. A single framed commendation on the wall. The tablet's red light a constant companion. The Merlin breach had been contained, but Ghost Viper's new alert hinted at another storm, one that required her eyes, her mind, her silence. She opened the tablet, scanning the data encrypted chatter, a new disinformation vector tied to civilian networks. Her name still a faint echo in the chaos Lynn had stirred. Yet Hannah's focus was unwavering, her purpose a compass that no betrayal could unsettle. Min's voice note arrived later, her tone urgent. Lynn's pulling back. She's editing the docuseries, cutting the podcast references. She wants to meet again. The message was not a victory, but a possibility, a chance for Lynn to step out of the shadow she had built. In a quiet DC park, Hannah met Lynn again, the air sharp with autumn's first chill. Lynn wore no suit, just a sweater and jeans, her face stripped of its usual polish. She carried a small notebook, its pages filled with scribbled questions for the docuseries. "I want it to be real," Lynn said, her voice low. "Not about me, but about you, about what I didn't see." The words were not an apology, but an offering, a recognition that truth could be shared without competition. Hannah nodded, her West Point ring catching the light for the first time unhidden. "Then tell it right," she said, her voice steady but soft. Psychologically, this is the moment of release where the betrayed and betrayer meet not as enemies but as equals, each carrying their own scars. It was not about erasing the past, but about letting it rest, allowing both to move forward without running. The classroom waited its cadets, a new generation of sentinels, their questions a reminder that Hannah's legacy was not in medals, but in meaning. As she stood before them, the tablet's red light blinked, but she let it wait. Command, she told them, is not about being loud. It's about being present, especially when it's hard. The cadets nodded their pens, moving their eyes, carrying a spark of her own resolve. Min's book was set to publish, Lynn's series to air, but these were not Hannah's victories. They were bridges connecting her truth to those who needed it. The archetype of the silent sentinel finds its freedom here in the quiet act of showing up, of refusing to disappear, of building a legacy that outlasts the noise. As Hannah left the classroom, the evening sky stretched wide, its stars a map of her journey. She was no longer the sister erased, the general saluted, or the prodigy dismissed. She was Hannah whole and unyielding, her purpose a light that needed no one's permission to shine. The tablet blinked again, but she walked on her boots, steady, her heart free. Truth when lived is louder than any lie, and Hannah's truth was a beacon guiding her home to herself.